Welcome back to Relationship Equity at Work. In our first lesson, we focused on building trust before you need it, as well as the importance of those relationship deposits. In this lesson, we're going to focus on one of the most powerful deposits we can make. What do you think that is? Listening. You see, we often think that communication is about what we say. That's not always true. Leadership communication is just as much about how we listen. And so, as we move through this course and we go through the slides and you listen to all the steps that I want to put in place for you, I want you to put those in practice. Sometimes people don't need us to immediately respond to them, right? They just need for us to listen. They don't need for us to solve the problem. They just need to know that we actually heard them. So it's like I always say, we need to listen to lead before we take action. See you in the next slides. Why listening matters. I want you to think about a time when you were trying to explain something important to someone and you could tell that they weren't really listening. Maybe they interrupted you. Maybe they were multitasking. Maybe they immediately started giving advice. Or maybe you could just tell that they were simply waiting for you to stop talking so they could respond. Now, how did that make you feel? Probably not very heard, right? That's why listening matters in leadership. When people feel heard, it can create a connection. It communicates respect and it can strengthen trust. But that doesn't mean that every conversation will result in agreement. It only means that the person speaking knows their perspective was given space. So, from a relationship equity perspective, intentional listening is a deposit. It is one of the ways we communicate. Your voice matters here. And listening doesn't require agreement. Sometimes leaders hesitate to listen deeply because they're concerned that listening might suggest that they agree. But those are two different things. You see, I can listen to your perspective, I can ask questions, and I can also acknowledge what you're experiencing. And then I can still make a different decision. For example, an employee might say, I don't agree with this change. A leader doesn't have to immediately say, well, here's why we're doing it. Instead, try this. Help me understand what concerns you most about this change. You see, that question doesn't change the decision, but it changes the conversation. You're creating space for understanding before responding. And sometimes that's exactly what the conversation needs. So next we're going to roll right into the 4-step framework approach. Intentional listening. Number 1, listen to give your full attention. Clarify to ask one clarifying question. Summarize to reflect what you heard. Then confirm to agree on the next step. So bottom line is, you're listening to understand before responding. So here's a simple framework. I'm going to give you extra examples. So when you're listening, you're giving the person your full attention before jumping to a conclusion. When you're clarifying, you're asking one clarifying question that helps you better understand the concern. Something as simple as, hey, I'm sorry, Beth, can you tell me more about that? Then you summarize it, and then you might say, so Beth, what I'm hearing is, right? You'll briefly repeat the main concern in your own words, and then you're finally confirming. So you're making sure that you understood correctly, clarifying what's happening next. You might say, is that accurate? Or here's what I can do next. So this doesn't have to turn into a 30-minute conversation. Sometimes these 4 steps can happen in just a few minutes. What matters is the intention behind them. So you may wonder, what gets in the way? Wait for it, I'll let you know. So good listening can sound simple. However, several habits can get in the way. We may interrupt, we may multitask, we may assume we already know what someone else is going to say. We become defensive, or we rush into the problem-solving mode. And sometimes we're technically hearing the words, but mentally we're checked out. We're already preparing for a response because you're the leader, right? That's why one of my favorite reflection questions is, am I listening to understand, or am I listening to respond? There will absolutely be times where you'll need to respond quickly, make a decision, correct something, or offer a solution. But I want you to take the time and give yourself permission to understand first. Give a short pause, and even that can change the quality of the conversation. I'm going to give you a workplace example. An employee and a supervisor. So the employee walks up to you and says, you know what, this workload is becoming very difficult to manage. The supervisor could immediately respond and say, you know what, everyone is busy right now. You just need to prioritize. So what do you think the conversation is going to do? It's probably going to end pretty quickly, right? But now, just imagine if the supervisor responds like this. Tell me what feels most difficult to manage right now. Did you notice that supervisor hasn't promised to reduce the workload? They haven't said the employee was right. They haven't removed accountability. They've just simply opened the door to understand what's happening. Maybe there's a workload issue. Maybe priorities aren't clear. Maybe the employee needs support. Or maybe after listening, the expectations stay exactly the same. But now the leader has more information and the employee has an opportunity to be heard. Now, that's intentional listening. Reflection and action. Now, it's your turn to reflect. Think about your recent conversations this week or last, or an upcoming conversation. So when the person comes to you with a concern, an idea, or even a disagreement, are you or will you be prepared to listen to understand, or will you be preparing your response? Here's your action from this lesson. During your next meaningful workplace conversation, intentionally practice the 4 steps. I want you to listen, ask one clarifying question, summarize what you've heard, and confirm what happens next. You don't have to fix everything. You don't have to agree with everything. Just practice being fully present in the conversation. Make listening your next relationship deposit. Thank you so much for joining me for listening to Lead. As you move through the rest of your work week, remember that sometimes one of the most powerful things you can give someone is your attention. Listen, clarify, summarize, confirm, and remember. Listening doesn't require agreement, it requires intention. Every intentional conversation is another opportunity to make a relationship deposit. Make the deposit, protect the equity, spend it wisely. I'm Lisa Miles, and I'll see you in our next lesson where we'll talk about navigating difficult conversations without unnecessarily damaging trust. Better conversations, stronger connections equals a greater you.